there's incredible demand to cross the channel, and basically criminality is providing a service. I mean, the victims in this case, of course, are handing over their life savings to the criminals to get them across. So it's there's something fundamentally wrong about there being no deterrent to this trade whatsoever.
It's been another deadly week, though, in the Channel. More than 750 migrants crossed to the UK on Wednesday, the busiest day so far this year. And 4 people later died attempting the journey. On the front page of the Times today, senior border force officers have expressed frustration with the French police over what they see as an inconsistent approach to stopping the crossings. They're also warning that the organised criminal gangs behind the crossings are becoming sophisticated and more violent. Well, John Vine is the former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. He's with us now. John, good morning, I should say, and thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Ryan.
Well, it's been the busiest day of the year for channel crossings this week. 4 people dead overnight trying to cross the channel. What is this telling us all about where we are now with the small boats crisis?
Well, it tells us that it's very unpredictable. So whilst at the same time that, the government is saying we've reduced crossings by 40% this year over last year, of course, last year was the second highest year for crossings anyway. Remember in 2018 when these crossings started, there were 299, and the then Home Secretary came back from his holiday and called it a crisis. So it's an ongoing problem of quite considerable proportions. And I think what the latest incidents yesterday show is that organised crime behind all this is getting more desperate and more reckless with people's lives. Larger boats, more crowded boats, more chances of people actually drowning at sea, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and Border Force saying, as I was saying in the introduction there, that there's just a problem with the French response. Is that a legitimate accusation?
Well, it was a bit painful to see the interchange, I think, between Chris Philp on the beach there and 1 or 2 members of the gendarmerie, because it looked as though the gendarmerie were basically saying their orders were to say to the migrants, it's dangerous out there, and then stand back and let it all happen. And that doesn't seem to be in accordance with what the agreement between Britain and France is. We've spent a lot of money with the French, and I thought, and I think a lot of people thought, that a new approach whereby officers from the maritime branch of the gendarmerie would get into the water and prevent these boats from obviously being launched. But it seems that officers seem to be allowed to do what they think is the right thing at the time, or nothing, as the case may be.
Yeah, it appears to be a battle between the law and the lawless in some respects, because you see the French saying that their officials can't enter the water because of legal liability if someone dies, which is extraordinary. And then you have these very sophisticated organised crime networks who seem to be becoming more and more adept at getting around the loopholes.
Yes, they are. They change their tactics very frequently. They're launching boats from Belgium further down the French coast to try and evade detection. They're using larger craft. They're also becoming more violent, and that's a feature, I think, of the latest picture is that, firearms are being found in the encampments, etc. So it is a cat and mouse game, but at the same time, I think they're exploiting some of the legal loopholes that you've identified. I mean, what needs to happen is that agreements need to be made and kept to. I presume there's some ongoing meeting between the French and the British around the agreement between Britain and France, and I would have thought this needs to be called together fairly urgently and a discussion take place about a consistent approach.
You've mentioned violence a couple of times, John. In what respect? How is that manifesting itself?
Well, I think I believe some weapons have been found in searches of the camps where, a lot of the migrants and organised crime used to organise these trips. And that in itself, I think, is an issue. Many, many years ago, the French used to close down and clear the camps because what happens is they're being used to rendezvous people, to bring people together, and that enables criminals to actually gather people together for this illegal trade. And I can't understand why those camps were allowed to exist. I also think that, one of the real problems is, of course, we're all dealing with it. We're watching the symptoms of the fact that there's incredible demand to cross the channel, and basically criminality is providing a service. I mean, the victims in this case, of course, are handing over their life savings to the criminals to get them across. So it's there's something fundamentally wrong about there being no deterrent to this trade whatsoever.
What is the deterrent, John? If you were in a position to conjure up some sort of meaningful deterrent, you were there at the coalface, what would you love to do?
Well, there was an attempt to try and create a scheme, the
Yeah.
Rwanda scheme, completely discredited, never got off the ground.
So that was a bit of a cockamamie scheme. So what, in a practical sense,
it was ruled, inadmissible, illegal by the court. But I mean, I would think that something similar to that is what a lot of European countries are looking at. When people cross illegally, they're looking at schemes which send them to other countries for processing, to provide a disincentive to people crossing and not being able to remain in the country of the choice. And it's something like that needs to be done. But it's politically very difficult to do. And, there's no word really that I can see. There's no sort of discussion going on about repeating a version of what the Rwanda scheme was designed to achieve. And in the absence of that, just enforcing the rules and trying to rely on enforcement alone isn't going to do the trick. The authorities may be going to reduce the numbers crossing by a small number, but it's still going to be a very active trade.
Although Wednesday was the busiest day of this year, John, overall crossings are reportedly down by nearly 50% compared with this point last year. Do you take some strength from that? Should we be encouraged by numbers like this?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge if that's the case, then something is working. I mean, the trouble is the Home Office don't tell us what they think is working. Of all the things they're doing, what is working well and what needs to be changed. So, for example, is the one in, one out scheme working? I don't think so. It's only really affected penny numbers. It must be greater enforcement, greater investment in joint work, intelligence work, probably with the French and the Belgians, which is good. But there are no metrics by which we can hold the government to account. Since the Conservatives said we were going to reduce migration in this way from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands and then failed to achieve that consistently, then no government seems to want to say, right, we're putting this money in, we're doing this sort of enforcement activity, and look at the work, the really good work that's going on with our border officials, and we expect to reduce crossings by half, say by the end of the year. Nobody will set a target for which we can actually hold the government accountable. So I think good work is going on, but I'm not convinced that it's going to resolve the problem.
Yeah, well, a lot of people listening in have some pretty harsh suggestions that I wouldn't like to encourage necessarily or read out, but there you are. It's certainly getting on people's nerves. John, thank you so much for your time today. John Vine is the former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, joining us